Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Chatting with Chase. My name is Chase, pastor here at River's Edge, and every week I've been trying to take some time to interview someone from River's Edge to help you get to know them better, to help me get to know them better. And today I get the privilege and honor to sit down with Kim Andrejczuk, which is not the proper way to say your name. How do you say your last name?
Andrejczuk.
Andrejczuk.
Yes.
It's easier to say than spell, I promise you that. So excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Here's the starter question, kind of just get it out there. There are people that are watching, they're like, I know who that is. What's up, kid? And there are people going, I don't know if I know her. So in a minute or less, who is Kim Andrejczuk?
I am married to Joe Andrejczuk, who goes here too. And we have 4 children and 6 grandchildren. And we've been married 42 years.
42 years, friends.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay, that's that number I was telling you earlier. Like that, you don't hear those numbers that much anymore. Like that is an incredible thing. 42 years.
Yeah. I've been a parapro at the elementary school that's right down the street from us for 20 years.
Wow.
I work with kindergartners and first graders, and I love it every year. It's always something new. I just love my job. So
it takes a special person to work with kindergartners and first graders, like that age group. They're awesome, but they're crazy.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So you've been doing that 20 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Same place. So
wow. And what's the name of the school again?
Averill.
Averill. Okay, that's incredible. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we need to know about you, Kim? I don't know. You tell me.
Oh, well, I'm black and Joe is white, and so we've had some unique situations in life, but always been good. Always seen it as a privilege that we get to see and be part of 2 cultures.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons, just to be open and honest in what I told you, why I want to have a conversation with you today is I've been telling people I want to keep the conversation going. I don't want to be a church that just throws a rock in the pond and has one big splash and then walks away from it. I want to be able to keep these conversations going because this is something that our church and Christians and people just in general need to keep talking about. Mm-hmm. And I was actually listening to a podcast this morning, and a black pastor was saying, we're talking about what we do in this time and how we as pastors and Christians can do this. And he said, keep talking. Don't stop talking about it. And so I called you and said, hey, you have a unique perspective, being you're black and married to Joe who's white. Like, you're right. Awesome privilege to be a part of 2 cultures. But I'm not naive enough to think that it's always been roses in the midst of that. So would you be up for kind of sharing a little bit, maybe some stories if you want or not, or just kind of how some good and some bad that's come with that?
Yeah, I was thinking about like one in particular with Joe that was really hurtful. 2 times actually. We were at a restaurant, we were traveling as a family, and we're enjoying our meal, and the lady comes over and she says, how would you like to divide the check? And we're just looking at each other like, what? And so Joe looks at him, he goes, and how would you propose we do that? This is my family, and these are my children and my wife. And that really bothered him a great deal. And then all of our kids, which is a funny story, have all worked at Red Lobster when they were in high school. Right. So they have a thing where they get a percentage off with their family if they go out to eat. And so we were traveling, and Christine hands Joe her ID, her work ID or whatever. And the lady looks and she goes away. She doesn't say anything at first, but then she comes back and she said, this is for families only. And he's like, this is my family. Yeah. And so I think for him that was a really hurtful piece. And, it's kind of hard. I know just as recently as last night, David and his wife Katie, and they're living with us right now, and he's looking for a new job. And so they went to Kohl's to get a suit and for the interview. And there was a man that walked up. He wasn't really close, but he gets on his phone and he calls Kohl's the front and says, I see a suspicious couple here.
Wow.
And we're just like, oh my gosh, it's
Last night.
just last night. And so it
Yeah.
was like, I guess it hurts. But all I can think about is, especially after you did the sermon on pause, and
Mm.
then you talked about, because I was really struggling. And when the biggest point that I came away when you said, praising God changes your perspective. And I think that's so true. But it made me think of, as you're talking, I thought of James 1:19-20. And everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because a man's anger doesn't bring about the righteous life that God desires. So I'm kind of like, when I'm in the Word with God, like I talk to him like a kid, even though
Yes.
I'm old. I'm like, okay, so what's man's anger and what's your anger?
Mm.
What's different between the two? And so Google's great. I it looked up, man's anger is really about his welfare, his comfort,
Mm.
his
Yeah.
his opinion, where God's anger is rooted in the other person. Like, God's
Mm.
anger is rooted in that, and God's anger brings unity,
Yeah.
and man's anger brings division. And
Wow.
so I just thought, because I was thinking on the way here, my hands were sweaty. I was really nervous, and I thought, it would be easier for me to march in a group of
Mm.
people than it is for me at this moment to go and sit face to face with someone, because you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You have to share yourself. You have to be concerned if what you're going to say will offend
Mm.
or whatnot. And I just, I thought, well, I had a sister saint. We call each other in this group, that were the two women that I'm in this study with,
Yeah.
and we call each other saint sisters.
Yes.
And one time, well, that's a whole other story. But anyway, she encouraged me this morning. She sent me a text and said, "Hey, sweet sister, I'm just calling to encourage you." And she spoke God's word,
Mm.
and so I thought, I it's so easy on Facebook to put up a little blip of that reflects your opinion.
Mm.
Well, this life matters. Well, this life matters, and I'm going to put a video. But people never take time to listen,
Yeah.
and to be slow to speak, and
Yeah.
slow to become angry. It just is a hard thing. And I know my son struggles, because you know he loves hoodies and sweatshirts and
Mm.
baggy sweatpants,
Yeah.
but there's a perception about him. And he got so upset, and he said, "Mom, I don't know how to do this, but I know that I want to honor God.
Yeah.
And so how do I do it?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, honey. We'll pray." And it made me think about another church that we used to go to, and they had a ministry where they went out and helped people. So, like whether you went to the church or not, you could call the church and say, "I have this need."
Yeah.
And so I remember David was like 10 years old. And so Joe and David and I went to this elderly white man's house. And when Joe got out, he was like totally cool. But then when David and I got out, it was like, okay, you could see the like confusion and doubt. But we painted the exterior parts of his house and windows stuff. So we were there all day. And I don't think this man had any real intention of fellowshipping with us. But all of a sudden, this older man, we come out, and he has this beautiful table set, and he ordered pizza.
Wow.
And he was so engaged with David.
Wow.
And so, and so it's like, our experience with him, we became part of him.
Yeah.
He became part of us.
Yeah.
And so David goes. So he didn't say anything after we talked about that memory, but then there's this app called Next Door Neighbor.
Yeah.
And so we're on that in our neighborhood. We live in Lansing. And so he just said, "Hey, I'm David Andrejczuk, and I want to do something." And he goes, "So if you have a need, just message me, or just put it on here."
Wow.
And he's gone to so many different people's home, putting on the Ring device.
Wow.
One older couple, and they were white, they needed to put their dock in the, so it's this muddy job. and all of that, and just like 5 or 6 experiences, but he gave them an opportunity to see a black young man close up and personal who's honoring God. And every
Mm.
time, like the last place that he went to was an older lady who was white, and she asked, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "To God be the glory."
Wow.
And so he goes, she was like, she didn't know what to do with that, but she was like, well, okay, well, that's good, you know.
What does that mean?
So I just think,
Yeah.
um, just those kind of opportunities. And I look at with our, I have 3 daughters, one
Okay.
son. And I have one daughter who's a little bit more leads with the feelings, And so what's been hurtful to me is when family members say things like, I had one family member say, "I'm so over this Black Lives Matter." And that was a hard day for me. And all I did was, Joe was on the computer, and I just went down and hugged him, and he didn't have to say anything. He did it. It was just, he just patted my hand like, it's all right. Yeah. And that was that encouraging piece. Well, my one daughter went and she messaged, she didn't, at least if she was good, she didn't put it right on Facebook, but she messaged her dislike of that. And then she did this with another relative, and my one daughter was like, "I love how we hold each other accountable," which I think in the conversation, I don't think you should feel like it should be a safe place for you to say what you feel. And I receive that, and back and forth. And so my one daughter reprimanded her in the sense or held her accountable and said, you don't really have a relationship with them on a regular basis, and that was wrong of you to approach them in that kind of way, unless you had some kind of dialogue or conversation or relationship with them. Because if you did, you probably wouldn't have responded in man's anger. You would have softened your tone and spoken to them about like someone who you care about.
Yeah, that's a good word. We always talk about, me and my wife always talk about who you can approach about different things, struggles, things they post or things they say, or what gives you the right to do that. And it's trust, and trust is built on relationship. And the greater relationship you have with someone, the more you can kind of get up in their business, right? The closer we are, the more I can call you out and know, because you know that I love you, and you know that if I'm calling you out, as much as that's hurting, you know that there's a love there, and so more than I want to call you out, I love you, and so I'm doing it out of love. It's why parents can discipline kids. It's like out of love. You can kind of get on your kids a little more because hopefully you've built a foundation of love there. And so I think that's a really good piece that you talk about there, like relationship and trust. And it goes into all that you're saying, like having these conversations. And I love what your son is doing, like putting himself in position where he is with people that are different than him and letting them see, like, we're just people. We're all people.
Right.
And I've been saying to people a lot, like, the cool thing about made in the image of God is that all of us are made in the image of God, no matter what color our skin is. And I love that piece, because I think made in the image of God, you paint a picture of God's image that's a little bit different than my image that I paint, that what God, God looks like. And I think we need all of us to get the fullest picture of who God is. We need all the cultures and all the colors. And I don't know, I just like that concept a little bit. So yeah, having the conversation. And I like how you said, like, it's about both of us being open and able to kind of share what we're dealing with. But I think that while we're having this conversation, keeping the conversation going, and I think what a lot of people want to do that struggle with is maybe don't have a lot of relationships with people that look different than them. What they want to do is they want to say, I'm over this, like, okay, we get it. We got it. Made a big stink for a while, guys. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Let's get back to normal. We're not seeing all this all the time. And I think that's what I'm trying to not do is trying to say, okay, let's not just move past this, because it's not something we should move past. Right. So as a Christian, I think you've talked about this, but one of the questions I was going to ask you, like, how does this work as a follower of Jesus? And I think you said a really good thing about using scripture, being slow to speak, quick to listen, and
Mhm.
also trying to find the difference between God's righteous anger
Mhm.
and our man anger, and trying not to lash
Lead with
out.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
lead. That's a good word. Lead with ours. So,
Mhm.
what else you got? What else you want to talk about? I
Oh.
told you this is me and you chatting. Those guys are listening
Oh
in,
my
but
gosh. Yeah, I I just think about, that you lead not with your feelings.
mm,
And that ultimately anger is starts with hurt.
mm,
Like you're hurt by something and it leads to anger.
yeah,
Because I know that's the case with me. The other incident was just recent too. Joe and my granddaughter and I were going into a grocery store, and a lady, she had a mask on. She is white, and she at first I was wondering why she was slowly pulling out as we were kind of coming. So she rolls down her window and she's making reference to my granddaughter. And at first I thought she was saying something kind, like, oh, she's so cute or whatever. But then I realized her tone, and she didn't take the mask off, but I realized that she was reprimanding her, saying that her outfit was inappropriate and how old was she and how dare I. And when I realized that that's what she was doing, I just went, no, like I just am gonna dismiss that. And so to me, it's like I always think about God's word. Um, that in Proverbs it talks about that reckless words pierce like a
mm,
sword,
mm,
but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And
mm.
so I've been watching this group of movies. I don't know if you know that there's an app called Tubi,
Yes, I've
and
never
they're
watched it, but I
oh
know
my
about it. Is it good?
gosh, it's
Tubi, folks.
awesome.
All right.
And there's this trilogy of movies called The Perfect Stranger,
Okay.
The Perfect Stranger on the Plane, and then Nikki and the Perfect Stranger.
Okay.
And it's Jesus.
Oh.
So in the first one, it's this unbeliever who gets an invitation to dinner with Jesus.
Mm,
And so it's just this powerful thing of her unbelief, and then her daughter meeting Jesus. And
mm,
of course Jesus looks different. I love how she was a woman in a suit. She was
mm.
a lawyer, so of course Jesus came in a suit as a
Yeah.
lawyer around her age. So when you said that thing about we all are images of Christ, we in one part of the third one, which I just finished. I love how when Jesus came in the picture, he was older, and she looked at him and she goes, "Why are you old?" And he goes, he didn't really say anything. She says, "Oh, because I'm old."
Uh,
But again, it's just like that representation of how Jesus wants to meet us right where
mm,
we're at and feel comfortable. But she had, walked with Jesus for the 10 years, but yet
mm,
she was mad at him when he got in the car, like, where were you?
mm,
And so there's a lot of things that ensues. But towards the end, she says um, that the expression that we express Jesus, God, to the world.
mm,
And so that impacted me so much that I want my expression to
mm,
be where they think of Jesus before they think of me. If I were to
mm,
mention Jesus to them, they wouldn't go, "Oh, you're a hypocrite because I
mm.
heard what you just
Yeah.
said, or I saw what you just wrote." I have such a hard time
Mm,
with that, and not that we don't make
yeah.
mistakes, because we do. We're human, and we're not perfect yet,
Right.
but um, but I would hope that as an expression of Jesus that you would be gracious
Mm.
for when I say stupid stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's a great. I think that's a good thing to kind of wrap up with. I love how you said that. And I think we can apply that to this racial conversation. And that's that we are an expression of Jesus to the world. If you're a follower of Jesus, listen to this. You are an expression of Christ to the world. So how we handle a situation like this matters.
yeah.
And what we say, what we don't say, how we act, how we don't act. If we're willing to go and start conversations with people, if we're willing to open up and to surround ourselves and get around people that don't always look like us, matters. And when people ask, just like they asked your son, why are you doing this? What's
Mm-hmm.
this about? To God be the glory. We're
Mm-hmm.
doing this because of Christ and what impact He's made in our life, and we want to express that to the world around us. So I think that's just kind of a cool little wrap up
Yeah.
piece of like reminder that we are always representing Jesus if if you call yourself a follower of Christ. And so we want the world to know that Jesus is about racial reconciliation. Jesus is about love for all people. And Jesus died because he believed that every life is important.
Yes.
So
Amen.
thank you so much for sitting and chatting. It's just me, you having a conversations. I forgot that people were watching for a little bit. We're so glad you listened to us. Hopefully you were encouraged and got to know Kim a little bit better. In like a week, July 5th, you can start maybe seeing people like Kim at the church, because we haven't seen people from the church for a long time, and we're going to be opening these doors here. So be looking for an announcement of that. But July 5th, we're opening the doors again, 9, 15, 11. Thanks again for listening to Chat with Chase. Kim, thanks so much for being here. Love you guys. We'll see you later.
Bye.